Good morning. Welcome back to Centennial Roots Homestead. If you're new here, I'm Kristen, and today we're going to be in the kitchen making a pre-prepared breakfast sandwich. If you all are one of those drive-through, get the breakfast sandwich kind of people, this is nice to have at home in the freezer, readily available for a quick breakfast or even an evening meal. It's about 0 outside, and so I am not excited about being out there, even though I need to get the nursery plants started and up and going. But hopefully this weekend the snow will melt and I can get on to that. So today we'll do the breakfast sandwich. This takes maybe 30 minutes to an hour of your time, and you can have at least a dozen breakfast sandwiches in the freezer ready to go whenever you need them. So the one recipe that I love to use is a sourdough breakfast bite recipe. You can actually do that in a muffin tin and have them as just little individual muffins. But what I like to do is either put them in a sheet pan if I'm making a large batch, or just in a 9x13 glass dish if I'm making a smaller batch. And then I can just cut those into squares and freeze them individually and add them to my breakfast sandwich. So that's what we're going to do today. If you want to, you can cut them out with your biscuit cutter and make them round so they fit the sandwich perfectly. And then what I do with those scraps that are around the outside is you can throw those in a flour tortilla and make a breakfast burrito with those leftovers. So really very versatile, very flexible. Being in the kitchen is fun. You should be able to do what you want that suits your needs. So let's get started on the breakfast bites, and then we'll also, I'll show you how I do my biscuits and how I make those flaky layers, like the ones that you can buy at the store, where that you can peel off those layers. So let's get started on it. Okay, so sourdough breakfast bites or breakfast muffins come together very easily, very simply. All I'm going to do is start with my sourdough starter. And I fed this last night because I knew I was making bread today and breakfast bites and biscuits. And so he's very full, ready to go. You can see some of the bubbles there on top. I've already used it, so it kind of deflated some of those. But all I'm going to do is start by adding 1 1/4 cups of starter. And this is a half measuring cup that I'm using. So I'm going to do 1 and then 1/4. And that's my sourdough starter. I don't distinguish between discard or starter. I just use whatever I have in whatever recipe, and it works just fine. So 1 1/4 cups of sourdough starter. And then I'm going to do 6 eggs. And I know eggs are expensive right now, but they're well worth the amount of protein that you get. Or if you have your own chickens, there's certainly a little bit of work and a little bit of feed, but well worth having. The thing about this recipe is you can add whatever you want to it and it still turns out fine. So that's 6 eggs. Then I'm going to add 1/4 cup of milk. And this is where it gets very versatile. So you can add peppers, onions, mushrooms, spinach leaves, whatever veggies that you want, or you can even add meat to it, bacon, sausage, that kind of thing. The way I like to do it is to add some onions. I eat onions in about everything. These onions are some vidalias that I had from the summer, and I just kind of coarse chop them and I freeze them in freezer containers like this, and then it's easy to pull them out with whatever dish I'm fixing, and I can just dig some out, throw them in. So however many onions you want, put that in there. And again, you can do peppers, you can do mushrooms, you can do spinach leaves, whatever sounds good to you. But I usually do a little bit of onion, and then you're going to add whatever seasonings you want. and I'm using the Centennial Roots herb blend because that's easy. I pull out one container and I've got everything I need in here. So salt, garlic, onion, parsley, oregano, a little bit of red pepper, and then however much I want, however flavored I want it. Again, put in what you want: oregano, parsley, basil, garlic powder, onion powder. And then I'm just going to mix this, whisk it up really good. And then once I have it mixed, I'm going to add in some cheese. I pre-shredded this cheese last night when we had a burrito bake. Anytime I'm shredding cheese, I just usually shred extra so that I can throw it in the freezer and then grab it out anytime I want. So depending on how cheesy you want it, I like a lot of cheese. So you just want to incorporate your cheese. I have used, this is sharp cheddar, but I have used mozzarella, I've used Swiss. That really gives it a nice flavor. You can use whatever kind of cheese you want. I would advise against doing pre-shredded. I mean, you can, but it's got that coating on it that makes it not as melty. And so if you can shred your own, you're going to get a lot better melty, yummy cheese without the added sawdust or whatever that is they put on it. All right, so it's nice and mixed up. That's all I need to do with that. Today I have just greased a 9x13 pan, and so I'm just going to dump this in. Now this is again up to your preference on how thick you want your breakfast bites or your breakfast sections to be. You can use like a half sheet pan, and that'll make them thinner. You can use a muffin tin and make them muffin thickness. I'm using this 9x13. I'm just going to dump this in, and I'm going to bake it at 350 degrees until the center is done. It's probably going to be about 20 to 25 minutes. All right, so it's ready to go in the oven. That took me all of, 5, maybe 10 minutes? Not even that. So I'm going to stick this in the oven, and I'll come back and show you guys how to make the biscuits while we're waiting on this to cook. Okay, so my egg bites are in the oven, and I'm going to go ahead and whip up the biscuits really fast. And when I mean it comes together fast, it does. So I'm going to start with 2.5 cups of flour. And I buy my flour in 50-pound bags, so I always have plenty. And then I've got wheat berries that I can grind when I'm in the mood to do that. So this is a 1/2 cup, and I just put 5 scoops of flour into my bowl. Then I'm going to add 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt. I use the Redmond real salt for all my baking. I'm going to add 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. My baking soda likes to clump, so you don't want to taste a big clump of baking soda in your biscuits. So there's a 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, and then a full teaspoon of baking powder. So we've got flour, salt, baking powder, and baking soda. Those are your dry ingredients. You want to give that a quick stir. Make sure that the dry ingredients are pretty well incorporated, just so none is clumping anywhere. And then to this, I can add a 1/2 cup of butter, or I like to do 1/4 cup or 1/2 stick of butter. And you want it to be cold, very cold. Even frozen is fine. So I'm going to add 1/4 cup of butter because I render my own lard, and I like to bake with it a lot. I think it makes a nice flaky biscuit. So this again was in the refrigerator, and I'm doing 1/4 cup of lard and 1/4 cup of butter. You can do all lard, all butter, half and half, whatever sounds good to you. All right, and then I'm just going to cut this in, and this is why you want it to be very, very cold or hard, is because you want to end up with little chunks of lard and butter throughout your dry mixture. This is what adds those nice layers in addition to a step we're going to do here in just a minute. If your butter is soft or gets too soft while you're working with it, just pop it in the fridge for a little bit, let it firm back up, and then keep on with your recipe. I love making these biscuits. A lot of times I'll do a double batch, and then you can freeze them. Once you get them shaped and cut out, if you lay them out on some parchment paper on a cookie sheet and flash freeze them, then when they're frozen solid, you can put them in a bag, and you can pull out, 2 or 4 or 8, however many you need throughout the week. We do a lot of biscuits and gravy or breakfast sandwiches. I will can up beef stew, and so it's easy to pull out a couple of biscuits for us to heat up, to cook with our beef stew. You can layer it over like a chicken pot pie. So it's just really nice to have healthy frozen biscuits readily available for a quick weeknight meal when you're coming in late and you don't know what to have and you don't want to run to town for nasty, expensive food. So, all right, so it just gets to the point where it's got those little peas in it. You can kind of see the little chunks of lard and butter throughout it, and that's how you want it to be, just like that. So then once you get that all incorporated, you're going to add 1/2 cup of your sourdough. Again, starter or discard is fine, either way. And I fed Lazarus last night, so he'd be nice and raised for me for today. There is a 1/2 cup. Now these are nice because on these biscuits, you can mix this up in the morning and then let it set on your counter all day and have a long ferment, which we know that sourdough and the long ferment is much better for gut health. But if you're in a hurry or you're doing a video like I am, you can certainly go ahead and mix them up completely. Because part of the process too is when they're thawing, then you're still getting a little bit of that long ferment. So in addition to the 1/2 cup of sourdough starter, I'm going to do a tablespoon of sugar. You could do honey if you want to, that's fine. You just want a little bit of sweetener in there for that sourdough to feed off of. So I just did a tablespoon of sugar. And then the last ingredient will be a cup of milk. Just use my same scoop here, my 1/2 cup. And I'm going to add a cup of milk in here. All right. So then I'm just going to kind of fold and incorporate until this makes a nice soft dough. I don't want to really stir or beat or anything like that because I want to keep my butter and my lard kind of in those pieces. And I did add a cold milk to it because that also helps keep them nice and firm. Because in this case, we don't want them melted. So I just kind of fold this over until I've got all of my dry ingredients incorporated into the wet ingredients. And this is the point where if you wanted to, once this was all mixed together, you can cover it with like a beeswax wrap or some plastic wrap or something like that, and then just let it ferment all day long. And you could come in the evening, go ahead and bake your biscuits from this point if you were ready to eat them, or cut them out and flash freeze them to save them for later, or a combination of both. So I've got a nice wet dough here. And so now I'm just going to flour my surface. And I'm just going to plop this out on it. And you can wet your hands or flour your hands if you want to kind of help. But I'm not going to roll this out. All I'm going to do is press it. And I kind of like to press it into a rectangle because this is where the fun next step comes in. I don't know if on the camera you can see all the little bits of butter and lard throughout there, but that's exactly what we want it to do. And then in order to make those nice flaky layers, you're going to tri-fold your dough and you're going to press again. Try not to keep your hands intact with it too much because you don't want to melt your butter. Again, you can see the butter all through there in the lard. And then you're going to turn your dough halfway, tri-fold, and press. And you can do this 3, 4, 5 times, depending on how many flaky layers you want in there. Turn halfway, tri-fold. And then, depending on how thick or thin you like your biscuits, you can do however thin you want. There's that butter all through there, if you can see it, hopefully. A little bit closer. You can see all the butter flakes in there. That's what makes it yummy. So my general rule of thumb when I'm making biscuits is I've got my mom's biscuit cutter. Used and abused for years, still works great. You can use a biscuit cutter. If you don't have that, grab an empty mason jar, use the lid. You can upside down, make bigger biscuits that way. Even a ring or any type of glass would work just fine to make your biscuits. But I generally like my biscuits to be about the thickness of my biscuit cutter because I know that they're going to raise tremendously. And so if I can start out about there, then that's about the thickness that we like for our breakfast sandwiches or biscuits and gravy or whatever. So I'm just going to press down gently through the dough. I don't want to twist because twisting will seal off the biscuit and you won't get those flakes develop as it bakes. So just gently press down. And we're just going to repeat this throughout. Now when you get to the end of cutting out all of your biscuits, you're going to have all these scraps left, and it's fine just to mush them all back together. Fold them again if you want, or just mush them together like this. Sometimes they come out looking a little uglier, but they're still very good, very edible. Now this is where I usually go ahead and put them on parchment paper and flash freeze them so that we've got them throughout the week or anytime we want them. If you have guests come over unexpectedly, then you've got biscuits ready to go. Like I said, I like to have beef stew or stuff like that jarred up. And so that makes it easy just to pull out the biscuits and have them ready in no time. They don't have to be perfect. I have little bits of concaveness in some of these, and that's perfectly fine. They'll still be fine. And then with the leftover scraps, Just incorporate it back into a biscuit. Just like that. So I got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11. Probably could have made it just a little thinner and gotten 12 for my perfect dozen, but that's okay. It's not a science, just whatever feels right to you. All right, so there are the biscuits, and I'll flash freeze some. I'll go ahead and bake up a couple and let you guys see what they look like. We will put these in the oven at 400 degrees, and you just kind of keep an eye on them, but roughly 25 to 30 minutes. So we should be, yep, we're coming up on 2 minutes on our breakfast bites. I'll get those out and I'll get these in and then show you how we put together the breakfast sandwiches. All right, so here are the breakfast bites straight out of the oven. Yes, sometimes the eggs do pop up, but they'll shrink back down as they cool. So no problem there. We're just waiting on the biscuits and then we can put this together. Okay, so fresh from the oven, very, very hot, flaky, layered biscuits. Here are the egg bites. And I just cut them into sections. I do freeze mine separately. I don't usually put them together as a sandwich and freeze them. You can certainly do that, wrap them individually in plastic wrap. The reason I don't is because sometimes they're just in the mood for an egg bite and I don't want the whole biscuit, or I want my biscuits for something else. So I freeze separately. And again, once these are cut, you can just lay them out on a piece of parchment paper, flash freeze them, and then put them in a baggie and they're ready to go. But there you can see just a nice thin layer that works good on a biscuit so that you don't have a huge mouthful. All right, I was also going to show you, I keep bacon. I will bake it in the oven, usually a pound or two at a time, and then I layer it between paper towel in a baggie and keep it in the freezer. And it's easy to pull out when I need a quick bacon for baked beans or for a meal like this. It's kind of like that pre-cooked microwave bacon you can get at the store, where you just put it between a couple of paper towels, heat it up for a few seconds, and you've got fresh, crispy bacon. But also it's nice because I can take my biscuit and see if I can do this one-handed. Open it up here. You can see the layers, all the flakiness. I mean, you could just peel this apart if you wanted in layers and eat it just like that with some butter and jelly. But stick your egg bite on there, heat up your bacon, stick your bacon on there. And that is the best breakfast sandwich ever. You don't even have to have that meat on there if you've added meat into the egg bite. But if not, then you've got the cheese on there. You've got the egg bite, the seasonings. Much, much better than anything you could buy through the drive-thru. So quick, easy, homemade, yummy breakfast sandwiches. You guys let me know down in the comments if you try them. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.